Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a legend run in the Catch Cup featuring a Pokemon that only released into the game 2 weeks ago, and that is Morgrem. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Mew3000, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, Morgrem has a really cool typing. It's a Dark and Fairy type Pokemon, has better stats than Grimmsnarl, and for the moveset, it has Sucker Punch, Foul Play, and Play Rough. So, as we watch these battles and watch Mew3000 at Legend, it's important to remember that Morgrem will be getting buffed in this new season as Foul Play is getting extra damage. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, off to a very neutral start, leading Tinkaton into Shadow Charjabug. Charjabug is going to outpace Tinkaton, but Discharge is not a particularly strong attack. So even with the Shadow bonus, Tinkaton's able to tank that quite comfortably. Tinkaton full sends the Play Rough is going to land, that does big damage, and a very nice switch out and catch onto Altaria. Altaria, not going to be too worried about the discharge damage, and the opponent now sends out a Shadow Zweilous. Zweilous, an incredibly cool pick. The Battle of Dragons, but Zweilous will need to put up a shield as Sky Attack would do quite a lot of damage. Altaria going to try for a Sky Attack, but it cannot get there. That is unfortunate, and in comes Tinkaton to absorb energy from the Zweilous. There's a Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse actually takes the knockout. I was unprepared for that amount of damage. Dark Pulse number 2 into the Morgrem, and in the back is Shadow Blastoise. Morgrem farms all the way up to a Play Rough, but only a Foul Play is probably going to be needed. Foul Play is going to get the shield from the Shadow Blastoise. Blastoise so close to the back-to-back Hydros, only one rollout away. The good news is Morgrem is only one Sucker Punch off the Foul Play. Foul Play needs to be enough here. Foul Play into the Shadow Blastoise. Blastoise hangs on, but the catch onto the Tinkaton. That's a scenario where next season the Foul Play would have knocked out, but this season the catch was needed. Morgrem Sucker Punches down Charjabug, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. Hopping into the next match, picking up a very tricky lead, Tinkaton into Shadow Scizor. Shadow Scizor has a good matchup into this entire team, so this is going to be a very difficult game to play out of. Tinkaton going to overfarm quite massively and fire off the Bulldoze. Bulldoze no shielded by the Scizor, but honestly pretty nice to get that 50-50 Bulldoze debuff. Scizor can go for the Trailblaze, but it will not take the knockout. Tinkaton is going to get a second Bulldoze, and then I imagine we see a pivot into the Altaria. You don't really want to concede a farm down. A second Bulldoze debuff goes through, so a bit of good luck does go Mew3000's way. Scizor takes quite a bit of damage. Oh my goodness, those Dragon Breaths are adding up. Opponent able to save their Scizor on very low HP, and they're going to switch their Altaria into the mirror. Sky Attack is going to land, dealing some pretty sizable damage. Opponent unable to get the farm down, as Mew3000's Altaria has just enough HP to make one final Sky Attack. Opponent does get the farm down, but in comes Tinkaton. Tinkaton will be able to force out energy from the opponent, and then it's going to be the Morgrem show. In comes Morgrem. Morgrem gets that Sucker Punch farm down. Opponent still has the Scizor, but the Scizor is very low. In comes Talonflame, and it's actually the non-Shadow Talonflame, so a bit of a surprise. I feel like every Talonflame I see lately is the Shadow. The non-Shadow actually means the Talonflame can survive the Foul Play and Sucker Punches pretty well. But it looks like this is 3 Sucker Punch range, so the opponent is not going to get a second charge move. And there it is. Morgrem gets the farm down. In comes Scizor. Bullet Punch fails to take the knockout, and that's going to be another win. Great lead in the next match. Tinkaton into Altaria. Opponent save switches into a Galarian Weezing, and this is actually a pretty big problem for this team. Galarian Weezing will be taking super effective damage from the Bulldoze, and we see a third Bulldoze debuff. Oh my goodness, the Bulldoze debuff's popping off in these battles. The shield goes up, and it proves to be a very wise decision, as this Weezing is packing Overheat. Overheat, now going to be only at -2, but Overheat is a very efficient charge attack. Oh my goodness, it feels like the Bulldoze debuffs are 100% in these battles so far. There's another Overheat. Tinkaton hangs on, not by much, and will get to fire off yet another Bulldoze. Thankfully, the Weezing lets itself get KO'd. In comes Marowak, and Marowak does get a pretty massive energy head start. This is quite scary for the Altaria, as Altaria is going to be taking some pretty significant damage from the Rock Slide. This is the non-Shadow Marowak, however. Opponent sends out the Altaria, and Altaria escaped one Fairy type just to run into a second, as out comes Morgrem. Morgrem, no baits here. Play Rough connects, that's big damage. Opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We've got some spice on the lead in the next match. Tinkaton into Salazzle. Salazzle going to be met with Morgrem. Morgrem immediately chipped down with a Poison Fang, but Morgrem will put up the shield. Salazzle, look at these Incinerates go. Oh my goodness, Morgrim. The Morgrim's in some serious trouble now. Morgrim foul play is going to be shielded, but Salazzle just going to undertap the Poison Fang and really try and ramp up these Incinerates as much as humanly possible. There's the switch out. In comes Shadow Altaria. Shadow Altaria, Dragon Breath going to be double resisted, but thanks to the double debuffs on the defense, it's honestly not super terrible for that Morgrim. In comes Tinkaton. Tinkaton's not going to like what comes next. That's a Shadow Flamethrower. Tinkaton barely able to hang on. Tinkaton will go for the Bulldoze, hoping to try and make this a bit of an easier farm down to try and exit with some energy. Tinkaton, oh my goodness, 1 HP remaining on the Shadow Altaria. They make the Sky Attack. Unfortunately, all that energy is lost, and this is looking like a very difficult game to win. Opponent in the back has Firo. Morgrim is able to make a foul play, however, and this will do some pretty nice damage to the Firo. Foul play is going to be shielded. In comes Altaria. Opponent still does have the Salazzle in the back, but the Salazzle has taken quite a bit of damage throughout the course of this match. Drill Peck lands, and unfortunately, just the Firo damage is probably going to be too much to deal with as well. A second Drill Peck will get Altaria deep into the red. Opponent is going to get KO'd. The Firo will get knocked out, but there's still the Salazzle. Will the Salazzle knock out in one Incinerate here? No, Salazzle. Oh, no. It was too healthy. It was healthier than I remembered. I had hoped maybe Dragon Breath farm down, but it's not to be. Super effective Poison Fang damage means game over. Tinkaton into Gastrodon, a terrible lead in the next match. Immediate safe switch out of the matchup into Morgrim. Morgrim is still not going to like this matchup. Gastrodon can threaten some pretty significant damage with Water Pulse. The no shield, Water Pulse is going to land. Morgrim will at the very least make it to a Play Rough. And Play Rough is going to do some significant damage. Shield comes up from the Gastrodon. Mew is going to need to wait down their switch clock before sending out the Altaria, and the Altaria bring-in should force the opponent to pivot out. They're actually staying in with the Gastrodon, and this is a pretty big surprise, as Gastrodon should have two pretty good checks to Altaria in the back. They pivot into Firo, but in my eyes, they made a pretty big misplay by throwing that Body Slam. That energy would have been more valuable elsewhere. Tinkaton is going to be shielding up as Firo goes to the Drill Run, trying to overfarm to the max. Oh no, accidentally overfarmed too much and played to a CMP tie that Tinkaton is never going to win. That means Drill Run lands, dealing big damage to this Tinkaton. Opponent is going to be letting that Firo go, and Firo gets farmed down. Switch clock will be up soon. It's Shadow Talonflame in the back, so the opponent was so weak to Altaria. I was expecting them to have a check to Altaria in the back, but I guess in Catch Cup, you kind of just have to run what you have rather than running what's good. Shadow Talonflame, unfortunately, does have a ton of energy. A Fly Catch is going to be needed to take home this win. The Sky Attack is going to be shielded. Opponent is at the back-to-back flies, and Altaria doesn't have enough energy. The shield goes up. Will we see the catch? Yes, we do. The catch onto the Tinkaton, and that's going to seal it. Fly KOs the Tinkaton. Back in comes the Altaria, and there's the immediate resignation from the opponent. We move to the next match, seeing a pretty familiar matchup. Tinkaton into the Shadow Altaria. Altaria going to be a very common Pokemon in this cup. Tinkaton going to be no shielding. This Flamethrower is going to hurt. Flamethrower lands, Tinkaton now very low, out comes Corviknight, but Corviknight just has an absolutely terrible time going against Altaria. Corviknight gonna fish for a boost with the Air Cutter 30% of the time, it pays off, but this is not that time. The no shield once again from Altaria, as Corviknight is just gonna keep spamming out these Air Cutters, fishing for boosts, second time's the charm, as now they're suddenly, at +1 attack, a lot more threatening to the Altaria. Flamethrower does get shielded. Opponent will still need a payback here. Even a boosted Air Cutter will not be enough to take the knockout. Altaria gonna be no shielding once again, but for a second time in a row, another boost comes out from the Corviknight. Second Flamethrower from the Altaria. Corviknight double shielding. Corviknight heavily investing in this matchup. Altaria finally gonna start shielding back, as getting this Flamethrower to land would be very, very helpful. Altaria, oh no, the Flamethrower is caught. Great counting by the opponent. They catch a Flamethrower onto their Shadow Altaria, and out comes Morgrim. Morgrim gonna take big damage from Sky Attack, so the shield will come up. Morgrim's gonna be in a zero shield scenario where Morgrim is gonna have an absolutely monster energy head start. This energy can go far into pretty much any matchup. Even if the opponent does bring back in the Corviknight, Corviknight is still going to be forced to go for Air Cutters, but they don't. Instead, they're going to bring out Tentacruel. Foul play into the Shadow Tentacruel is going to hit for some pretty nice damage. Morgrim already going for foul play number 2. Penta now deep into the red. Switch into Altaria. Answered with the Corviknight. Corviknight realizes it cannot get the Sand Attack down. One damage Sand Attack just simply not cutting it. There's the Air Cutter, and they get another boost. This Corviknight, the boosts are non-stop. Air Cutter into the Morgrim will take the KO. Finally, they do not get the boost. Play Rough will do more here, and Play Rough is going to be the correct move to go for. Play Rough knocks Corviknight out of the sky. In comes the Tentacruel, and with that perfect energy management, Tentacruel gets KO'd. No Scald is reached, and that's a win. Tinkaton into Dedenne in the next match. Considering what's in the back, pretty nice to have the Dedenne here on the lead. Dedenne, interestingly enough, not throwing the Parabolic Charge instantly. Instead, letting that Bulldoze land, and that's some pretty valuable health loss for the opponent. Dedenne will typically spam out the Parabolic Charges instantly. I guess maybe they could have been worried about a catch, but even a catch, I think would still not be the worst because then you would have switch advantage. Look at Tinkaton barely able to hang on, surviving the second Parabolic, getting the Bulldoze, and now an aggressive pivot into Altaria. Altaria going to farm up a ton of energy. Opponent is going to be pivoting out and sending out their Credilli. Credilli down this much energy, not going to have a super fun time against the Altaria, as Altaria gets to a second Sky Attack, locking in some pretty considerable damage before the opponent is even able to get a single Rock Tomb. Altaria no shields. Rock Tomb will not be able to take the knockout. This is not the Shadow Altaria, it is the regular. Altaria would love nothing more than a farm down, not going to get it, forced to send in the Tinkaton, but Tinkaton is able to force energy out of the Credilli. Credilli takes the knockout, but that's kind of the best case scenario. In comes the Morgrim. Morgrim gets a small energy head start, and it's Furret in the back, and Morgrim is about to absolutely feast. Morgrim double resisting Sucker Punch means Furret has absolutely no fast move pressure to speak of. Morgrim farms up quite a bit and will go for the foul play. Foul play is going to be no shielded by the Furret. There's the switch into Dedenne. Dedenne firing off the Parabolic Charge. This is going to be grabbing a shield from Morgrim. Morgrim, instant under tap of the foul play, just wanting to get Dedenne off the field. But Dedenne says no. Dedenne puts up the shield. Dedenne gonna force the final shield with the Parabolic Charge. Is a Sucker Punch down possible? This Dedenne is so boosted. Morgrim gonna bank energy, snipe down with the Altaria, and Furret can't even get the Sucker Punch down of the Altaria. There's a move on the Altaria, there's a move on the Morgrim, and Furret just has nowhere to go, so that's going to be a win. Moving to the next match, leading Tinkaton into Firo, and this matchup is honestly a bit uncomfortable for both Pokemon involved. Firo has a pacing advantage and is able to hit for big super effective damage with Drill Run, but the downside for Firo is that Drill Run does not one-shot, and Peck is very minimal fast move pressure. Tinkaton shields the first, not gonna bait, gonna be going straight for the Play Rough. Play Rough does get shielded, so the opponent will be able to retain that pacing advantage, and the switch to Altaria. Tell me it's the Drill Run. It is the Drill Run. What a savage catch onto the Altaria. Firo gonna stay in this matchup, bank energy, and send out Galarian Weezing. But Galarian Weezing down energy is honestly gonna do pretty poorly into the Altaria. Look at that Sky Attack. Sky Attack, huge damage onto the Galarian Weezing, and I just don't believe Shadow Sludge will take the knockout. The bulk of Altaria coming in clutch, the undertap of the Sky Attack, really looking to ramp up the pressure on the Weezing. Weezing just lets itself go, it gets knocked out, opponent gonna be sending in Spidops, and Spidops is gonna get a full farm down. The good news about seeing Spidops is completely walled by Steel types, so when Tinkaton gets brought in, as long as Tinkaton's health remains, Spidops is gonna have a truly terrible time. In comes Firo, that's going to be answered by the Morgrim. Morgrim will take a lot of damage from Drill Peck, so the shield will come up. Morgrim would love a farm down. Oh my goodness, the Firo hangs on. Look at that health bar. Firo makes the Drill Peck, and that is some pretty significant damage. Back in comes the Spidops. Spidops will be able to take the knockout with the lunge, but the damage has been done. How is it going to be able to damage this Tinkaton? Tinkaton could have gone for a bait, decides against it, gonna full send the Play Rough. Opponent tries to call the bait because they know they were in a tough spot, and that's going to be a win. Hopping into the final match, Tinkaton into Empoleon. Now this is definitely going to be a problem Pokemon for this team. Immediate safe switch into Altaria. The hope is that the Empoleon stays in and plays this out. Landing a Flamethrower as the Altaria would be incredibly helpful. Drill Peck lands, haven't switched out yet, and Empoleon is going to be hit with this Flamethrower. Will the opponent decide to invest in it? The Flamethrower lands, and that is extremely valuable damage. Because this team really does not like Empoleon. Shield comes up, Altaria really wants to get rid of the Penguin. Altaria gonna go for the Sky Attack. Will Empoleon decide to put up the shield? Yes. Empoleon's gonna fight for switch advantage. At this point, I honestly think you just let this go, and potentially could even try and go for a Fairy Wind down. But the opponent switch locks his Spidops, and that's what you cannot do when you know there's a Steel type on the field. that's going to cost the opponent, as what's the Spidops going to do into a Tinkaton? Spidops goes for a Rock Tomb. I mean, anything Spidops throws here is going to be resisted. Rock Tomb obviously single resisted, and the lunge would be double resisted due to the Fairy and Steel typing. So Spidops, unfortunately, having a very tough time of it. Spidops going to go for another Rock Tomb. Tinkaton still pretty healthy. Now at -2 attack, will look to get this Spidops very low. Play Rough is going to land. Quick switch by the opponent. They're going to be sending out Dartrix, and this game is going to come down to a very tricky bait call. Will the Dartrix go for the Brave Bird? The no shield. Oh my goodness, Morgrim gets rocked, and unfortunately this game is probably going to end in defeat. Morgrim tried to call the bait. The Brave Bird was thrown. Dartrix shields up the Play Rough, and unfortunately there's just no path forward in this game. A 50-50 call, opponent got it right, and that's game over. All in all, these were some very fun battles, so many thanks to this trainer for sending them in. Morgrim is a Pokemon that I have actually built myself, and I'm pretty excited to try in the new season, as obviously getting a little bit of extra damage on foul play can be quite helpful, especially when you're a Pokemon that really likes to land one charge attack and farm down. Like for example, in that Shadow Blastoise game, that foul play next season would have actually knocked out, making a catch, which is kind of a bit of a more high-risk play, not as necessary. I do think Morgrim is still probably going to be in the realm of Spice rather than like a top climbing pick next season. It's the type of Pokemon that I could see absolutely terrorizing future limited metas. It would have been incredibly interesting in the EUIC meta, which is coming up in February, but unfortunately it actually got spot banned, presumably for the reason that it's a little bit tricky to get because it does require a lot of XLs, and it generally does outperform Grimmsnarl in terms of bulk. So Grimmsnarl is actually allowed in that EUIC limited meta, but unfortunately the Morgrim is not. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.